Hey there, I am Tomlin's Nyback. You're tuned in to 365 days towards racial change. I'm at day 175 here, moving right along, coming up on our halfway point. I don't know, I'm not sure if we're going to have a celebration or what, but we're still finding a way to make it happen. I've not been shut down. Um, we won't go into my paranoia and conspiracy theories around this, but I'm glad that the message, I'm able to still get the message out. Yeah, so we're here talking about black issues in America, black condition, whether it's good, whether it's, uh, needs room for improvement. Is it, what's the nature, character of it, and such. Um, I am struck as I move along in this project, two major thoughts are on my mind. First thought has two parts, and the first part is for the mind of black Americans. Are black Americans still thinking? Is the slave mind still alive in black Americans? Look at the way we behave, how we aspire, how we move in the system. Are we hampered, hobbled mentally within this? Did 300-400 years the institution of slavery make a mark on a people of a certain skin color in America? So that's kind of what I'm teasing at about the mind of black Americans. Second thought is just the other side, same coin. For white Americans, their privilege, power, expectation of favor, their control in America and in the world, dictating policies, moving assets around, sanctioning here, favoring there, a kind of Magna Carta, Pax Romana of the world. Hey, listen, America was created by European whites, for European whites. It's administered essentially by European whites. Their descendants hold sway over all this. So is there a mental condition that goes with maintaining and supporting that? Stick around. I think the way we are looking at this issue, race in America, black specifically, exclusively, from all these facets, we can glean some interesting ideas for ourselves. And I want us to critically think about these things. I don't just want to have an answer, but let's look at materials and stuff and find out not just where we stand, but why we stand in this position, how we came to this point. I know I came to this point from my personal experiences. I had no way to articulate what was happening to me from the world, So that's some of the things we're talking about with the mind of Americans, black versus white, essentially. My second big thought and concern is for financial literacy, for black folks to understand how money works, why it works the way it does, to get, understanding the difference between what your bank account may say electronically versus the few dollars, paper dollars you have in your pocket. Understanding the power of each. Understanding some of America's hidden financial agendas. hidden tax called inflation. Why do I call it that? Is it really a tax? I don't know. Well, if my dollar, if I go to, we'll use Walmart. If I go to Walmart with this dollar and I could buy so much bread, but then when I come back the next day, I can buy less bread, then I've just been taxed. That's a result. That's a very very simplified explanation of inflation, and it's a deep value as the value of my dollar goes down. That's a tax. It's called a hidden tax. So we want financial literacy in some of those other ways beyond a bank account and that I'm saving. Maybe you got a little drawer of pennies and coins. I got my little jar going. You know, if the bottom ever falls out, maybe those coins will be worth something, or triple, quadruple in value, or just be flat out worthless paperweights. I don't know. But that's some understanding how money works. It's important to breach um, your understanding about money in America and how all that works. Like I said, I couldn't articulate what was going on. My experience in America, it was really coming to a crisis point. Fortunately, a friend of mine helped me out, stumbled on to this man. She introduced me to this man's work. His name's Dr. Claude Anderson. I watched a bunch of videos, was sold on his message, bought a bunch of books. Therefore, his books inform a lot of our discussion here. I just mentioned, I'm just so grateful that this guy, I don't know him personally, I hope I meet him someday, I don't know. But, he just put a face on my experience. I had, that's some more literacy. I have some more racial literacy, historical literacy in my toolbox now. And before I just had all these instruments and experiences, but with no face on them. He helped me articulate this stuff, so I'm very grateful. Hopefully I meet him someday. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. I'm going to tell you where to get these books in a moment. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. And Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and the Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C. Behind me, you see the hashtag #US2 symbol. It's Black women support one another, hanging out there. I think that's on Facebook. I haven't checked in on them in a while. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook experience. A lot of communities there on Blackness. If you can't find your flavor or your voice, this is the World Wide Web. So go to it. Got billions of channels, surfings, and out there. If you can't find your niche, do what I did. Start your own. Start your own voice and make it happen. No, this internet has really torn away a lot of excuses of not being able to self-express oneself. And finally, we take time, we look at a fictional account of slave life in America. We find a lot to glean about the institution, how the institution may still be, institution of slavery may still be visible in today's society. So we take a look at that occasionally. Today's the last part 4, very dense chapter on Miss Ophelia's experience. And so we look at fictional life of slave and slave master life, the institution of slavery in America, and glean, and it could spark some, I think, some important discussions about what's going on then, now, and possibly the future for Black people in America. We left off with Miss Prue. We met her. She seemed to have a very strong, African connection. She holds loads of wares on her head and stuff. She squats on the floor when she comes to a place where she's going to spend, a few moments conversing and doing commerce, much like some African women would do. So she may very well be from the original African land there in our story as she's introduced. But the load she carries is indicative of something heavy on her heart. We found she gets beaten a lot, whipped. She's alcoholic, so she steals. Her masters find out and punish her, but still keep her out in the, doing commerce in the community. All kinds of actions to try to keep her hand out of the till, keep her from getting finances for money. Her slave, Miss Ophelia, is judgmental of her, but we don't expect much different from this proper white lady from up north Vermont coming down to the south to show people how to live and stuff like that. So, she kind of gets a pass, Miss Ophelia. Okay, no problem. But Prue is berated often by Dinah and Mr. Adolph, the house slaves, because they live on the St. Clair plantation where things are okay. They have no self-identity and stuff like that. They're slaves. I'm sure they get occasional chastisement and whatnot. But Prue's experience is much more violent, and judgments are much more physically harsh. I forget what I was reading a long time ago, but some slaves up north, and there's two slave sisters were they're usually in competition with one another for resources and things like that. They were starving in their master's home. They were often found rummaging in the gutter and in the trash, trying to find sustenance. So Tom, it's interesting. Tom's coming from up north. He's had kind of a civilized experience. Now he's a little further south. Well, he's in deep south. And the experience is kind of heightened, but he's got Eva, a little white child to take care of some of that disillusionment and bewilderment and whatnot. But he's not immune. He knows slaves everywhere to some degree. Someone is being mistreated, abused, and stuff like that. So that's where we find Prue, So Prue, she's carrying a load there. I want to impress that upon us. And she's judged by the other slaves doing better. And we talked about Black overclass versus Black people who are in more challenging experiences, don't have economic resources and means, making ends meet is very challenging and tough for many Black lives. So that's kind of the picture. Mr. Adolph and Dinah would be Dr. Anderson's Black overclass, being judgmental, obstructive, insensitive to the other Black folks who need to struggle a little bit more to find some peace. Prue's given a drink, steals. There's something going on there. we have to remember, I mean, you don't find, it's not common when people have all their needs met for them to be criminals. You don't turn out a criminal when you got everything you need. You know, criminality may have its source in need, in privation, in desperation. You know, they're not getting enough. They're not participating. Therefore, they need to resort to subterfuge to get their needs met in many cases. Uh, so what's Prue's problem? Well, I'm going to take some time. I put this in the brief notes. I hope it didn't get parsed out by Google, but I'm going to read this Prue's story directly. I'm going to get this directly from her lips and find out a little bit about Prue's condition, why she's in this state. She's apathetic. She's got a thick skin. Not great. Yeah, she's got visible wounds. Her contemporaries who do a little better are abusing her. She's carrying a load, but something is broken in Prue. There's something's has dried up, is closed off. The capacity to feel is gone from her. Her self-will, self-identity is gone, stripped away. And it may go beyond simply being a slave, being captive, beholden to white power, the institution of slavery. But let's let Prue tell the story. Tom says, well, first she talks, Tom has intercepted her. We left off yesterday with that. And he's trying to bring her some hope and relief through Jesus and religion and stuff like that. She says, I'm going to read, there's a lot of southern tenses in here, so hopefully I can do her justice and try to follow. Get the book. Up in Kentuck, a man kept me to breeding chil'en for market and sold them as fast as they got big enough. Last of all, he sold me to a speculator, and my master got me out of him. Tom says, what set you into this bad way of drinking? She says, to get shut out of my misery. I think she means just she wants to get out of her some miseries going on. I had one child after I come here, and I thought then I'd have one to raise. And this is another plantation, not St. Clair's plantation. I think I'd have one to raise because master wasn't a speculator. The speculation is, getting, it's an expectation to get profit from the slave. She says it was the purest little thing, and Mrs. seemed to think a heap on it at first. It never cried. It was likely and fat. But Mrs. took sick, and I tended her, and I took the fever, and my milk all left me. And the child, it pined to skin and bone, and Mrs. wouldn't buy milk for it. She wouldn't hear to me when I told her I hadn't any milk. So her breast, the fever, this illness, dried up her breast. She wouldn't hear to me when I told her I hadn't milk. She said she knowed I could feed it on what other folks eat. And when I was growing up, I saw one of my aunts actually doing this, but for an older child, not a baby, where they take the food, moisten it, chew it on the mouth, and feed it to the child. You can do that with an older baby, but this child is obviously much younger and can't give it solid food at this time. And the child kind of pined and cried and cried and cried day and night, and got all gone to skin and bones. The kid is starving to death. You just look at some of the outreach commercials for starving kids in Africa, and you see this ribs showing, thin arms, and all this. If the belly is bloated, that means that's a sign of extreme disease there. Um, and Mrs. got sought against it, and she said, "'Twas nothing but crossness." She's saying that her slave Prue is being uppity and stuff about the child and not taking care of the child and her. And she is like Marie St. Clair, very narcissistic. The world is about me. I need tending to. Everything else is secondary, or a far second, not even a close second. Don't even be around me thinking to care for someone but me is uh, her approach here. She, Prue's Mrs. Masser, wished it was dead, she said, and she wouldn't let me have it on nights because she said it kept me awake and made me good for nothing, right? Caring for the child takes away from the attention to the master. Oh, wow. She made me sleep in her room. I had to put it away off in a little kind of garret, and there it cried itself to death one night. It did, and I took to drinking to keep its crying out of my head, out of my ears. I did, and I will drink, and I will if I go to torment for it. Master says I shall go to torment, and I tell him, I've got that now. It's her. There's a sense of self and understanding. Um, this crime's been committed, but it was just the last straw. You know, she'd be content falling into a fire, falling off a cliff, even starving her own self. Whatever keeps her going is fully at the behest of her masters and the institution of slavery. She's given over to it, and she's in a hopeless state from this torment. She's got no help from the community. She is totally given over to the experience and does not care what happens to her. She's glad to go to torment. It's going to be a rest. It's got to be better than here in this existence. She even goes on to tell Tom, look, Tom's talking about heaven and stuff like that. And she's like, look, if white people there, I want to go to hell. You really got to screw with somebody pretty bad for them to be like, I want to be opposite of you in eternity. I don't care which eternity or the nature of the oppositeness, just as long as I'm not in there sharing space with you. That's how bad you've made life for me. Wow. It's not even hate. It's I don't need to be somewhere where you don't exist because of this harm. You're a kind of person who uh, you know derives life from this oppression and doing this harm. I don't want to share space with you for all eternity. Yeah, that's a wound right there. That's a wounded person, And I think the story continues, but it's going to take some strong intervention even in our present lives, you know, it's why family members aren't part of juries or prosecutions in court cases because it's impossible to be objective. This is Prue's um, the attitude of her mind. It's fully justified. I'm not condemning her one bit. You know, they used her like a dog, and he sold off her babies. It's total. It's the way the machine of the slave institution dehumanized this group of people solely based on the color of their skin. You're black, well, you're drafted into this process. You are a product. You are, a tool for production. That's it. You and we refuse to allow you to have any sense of self or ownership in the world. That is what Prue. That's the load on Prue. So heavy she doesn't have time to find a chair to sit down in. She must squat right there in her space when she comes to rest. Tom is broken up. But before I say that, we look at America. Something that I watch news more now and stuff. Probably shouldn't. Nothing. It's not saying anything new, but a quick point I want to make is about America. America loves trade and rhetoric without getting anything done. And America thinks there's success in trading rhetoric rather than getting stuff done. Pointing fingers at each side and stuff like that, and just waiting for the news cycle to complete so they can move on. I used to be in that same trap. Unfortunately, I'm more in a results-oriented life, but I could talk a good game, and as long as it made you feel good that I said I was aspiring to something, then I was totally fine with that. That's just not going to work over the long term. That's not working. Tom's broken up by the story. They finally part. I'm sure he lets out a heavy sigh, and he's just shaking his head. So the slavery institution has wounded this person to the degree they don't care. Eternity, they need to be rehabbed in this life so they can receive and make a truly informed decision. Right now, Prue's decision is based on the injustices of the system. She's not even making a sober, informed choice about her eternal soul here. So Tom, he has nothing to rebuke that. He finds some saving grace. He goes to the garden. Eva is there wearing roses on her head and stuff, and she's being the nice little innocent white girl there. Remember, Eva's mature, very mature, kind of beyond her years, and so she sees Tom's demeanor, inquires. Tom tells her the story. Eva's now jammed up about that, and we find that's consistent for Eva throughout the story. When she sees inequality, hard work, people not experiencing life, that impacts Eva. So not only she hears Tom's story, now she feels for Prue and all this stuff. She takes this stuff inward and processes it like a very mature adult. And we finish up the chapter. I think she takes Tom's hand and they frolic off somewhere just to handle some business. But it ends at the last line. Tom, he tells Prue's story. Eva's cheeks grew pale, and a deep, earnest shadow passes over her eyes. She laid both her hands on her bosom and sighed heavily. Eva doesn't like this stuff going on in the world. You know, what a special little girl that Harriet Beecher Stowe has created. We're out of time. I'm running over here, but I'm glad we took some time with that chapter. We're going to continue. We got a long way to go, and we'll see what time does for us. My life's about to get pretty busy. We got to do some housekeeping. I'm going to be traveling, so stay tuned as we wade through some of our own turbulent times here at Racial Change. I'm Tomlin's Nyback, day 175 out of the way of 365 days towards racial change. So I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.